So I missed the brightest comet in that decade simply due to visa.
Babak Tafreshi, thank you so much for joining me today.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been a big admirer of your work for a long time. I've watched many of your lectures. I saw your project in the Smithsonian recently, and I find your work very fascinating. So I've been very excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you for visiting the exhibit.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And I'm in Texas, so you've talked about Texas a lot in your talks. You were here for the eclipse recently, and we have the McDonald Observatory here, which I go to often. So I'm excited to talk to you about that too. I'm going in less than a month, actually, again.
Yes. In fact, that's a place that I first captured one of the mysterious phenomena in the Earth's upper atmosphere known as red sprite. I was next to the observatory.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I first visited maybe 20 years ago, and every time I go back to Marfa, which is often, I'll stop there for sure and do the star party.
Oh, you attend the star party in May?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Well, no. They have
the weekly one, yes.
Yeah, the weekly one. Yes.
So every year in May, there is a major star party known as Texas Star Party, and about 500 people with giant telescopes come together in a land near the observatory, about a few miles. And this is one of the world's most known star parties that people from beginners to pros are attending.
Wow, incredible. Okay, well, so this program is called Growing Up Irooni. So I wanted to, since we have a little bit of time, kind of get back to your upbringing. So you were born in Iran and you didn't leave until you were 30 years old. So can you kind of tell me about your upbringing and about that first experience of looking at the moon in Iran?
Sure. I was a teenager, a 13-year-old kid. I borrowed my neighbor telescope, boy of the same age, and he never used the telescope. He suggested me to let's try it. So we went to the rooftop of our apartment in Tehran, and the first look at the moon for me was life-changing. I can still remember that moment, second by second, all the craters, mountains. It was incredible to see so many details of another celestial body in the outer space with just a little telescope. So that simply changed my path. And later on, I became an astrophotographer trying to capture things through a telescope. But through the time in my high school, I realized my main passion in photography of night sky is not through the telescope, but wide angle, in order to include landscapes on Earth and the sky in one frame, in order to connect Earth and space, connect science and art and culture in one perspective. So that became a goal. And meanwhile, I was studying physics in the university. I joined the Astronomy magazine of Iran as a young editor. Then I started a TV program with my friend Siavash Safarian. And that lasted for more than 10 years. I had more than probably 100, 150 shows. And gradually, it was a mix of science journalism and photography at the same time. But in 2007, I started an international project called The World at Night, where my work shifted more towards photography. And this project, which was founded with my colleague Mike Simmons in California, and I was in Iran at the time, brought together a group of 40 photographers in 20 countries. We became the special project of Year of Astronomy by UNESCO in 2009 with worldwide exhibit. And that really transformed me to a more internationally known person. There was a prize for science photographers in 2009 by Lennart Nilsson Foundation in Sweden, which that prize, that award, was a milestone for my work. So a couple of years later, I joined National Geographic. But since I was located in Iran and due to sanctions, I couldn't make any contracts. So everything was freelance, so truly free. And therefore, I had to move Iran for this and many other reasons. Another one was internet was so much filtered. Even my own website was filtered. And I was, it was a pain to see every day human rights issue. It was a pain for me and also for my wife. So we decided to go to Germany and expand the Word at Night project there with more exhibits and activities, because I already had an active office with one of my colleagues there. So it was 4 years in Germany, and then due to National Geographic growing collaborations, we moved to the US in 2015, and now it's roughly 10 years that I'm building my work mainly in the US.
Wow. Well, you went through it very fast, but going back to that 13 years old, can you tell me in Tehran, I mean, one thing that you talk about a lot is light pollution. Tehran has a lot of light pollution, although from, I visited, the last time was 2009, and I do remember coming into the city, it is an amber glow, and you talk about that a lot, the colors of amber versus blue light. I feel like Iran is very amber. I've noticed that compared to even in the US. So what was your experience with light pollution growing up, and what was it about that seeing the moon that was so life-changing?
Yeah, one thing about amber, in the Middle East and Asia in general, the light is changing to white, unfortunately, because it's cheaper to buy for the cities. It's slightly more energy efficient than amber LEDs, warmer LEDs. But as you mentioned, and many of our audience probably know, the white blue LEDs are harmful to human body by changing our sleep cycle. And it's changing circadian rhythm in many other species too. So that's why they have their own use inside the offices in daytime, where we need that exposure to white light. But for nighttime, we are much better off exposed to warmer, dimmer lights, which was the sodium vapor in the past. But because they're not really energy efficient, we had this transition to LEDs. But instead of going towards warm LEDs, many cities went and changed to white LEDs, especially in East Asia. And today we know this by a very solid science that there is a real impact, major impact on human health. But, Tehran is a mountainous city. And if you're near mountains, you can easily get away from light pollution by changing the elevation. The higher you go, there is less scattering of light in the air because the air is thinner. Therefore, there's less scattering of light pollution. I remember I was climbing a lot during my teenagehood. Climbing and hiking was one of my main hobbies, and it was mixed with the stargazing. And going to the top of Tochal, which is roughly 4,000 meters or 12,000 feet, you could see the Milky Way, opposite direction of Tehran. Tehran is like 200 degrees of light from there, but you just face it backward and you see the Milky Way because of the elevation. Another place I was frequently there to photograph was the Dizin Peak, which is high altitude, and it's just 30 kilometers from Tehran. But the most inspiring two places that really changed me in my career of astrophotography, together with my colleague Oshin Zakarian, who was one of the first people I collaborated with in my teenagehood and continues today. In fact, he's part of the Word at Night project. We were going to Mount Damavand and the slopes of Damavand in the Haraz Valley. It's just 70 kilometers away from Tehran, but because of altitude, you have dark skies. And this mountain, it's so uniform, spectacular volcano. It's still alive, the highest live volcano across Asia, has such a profound impact, not only in my work, in my life. It's just a symbol of unity, symbol of resilience for the Persian culture. And it's my favorite mountain on the planet, I would say. And the second place that really changed the way was Alamut Valley. Alamut is part of the Alborz Mountains, and it's home to many of those mysterious castles left by the assassins in, roughly 800 to 1,000 years old. There are several castles, and now on the tentative list of the World Heritage. And one of them, which is the so-called Alamut Castle in the village of Ghazur Khan, was our frequent destination. And the reason was this castle was also home to a famous Persian astronomer for many years before the Mongolian attack. He was based there on top, and he built his own observatory. He contributed to the library. His name is Birun Tusi, Haji Nasiruddin Tusi, or in English sometimes referred to Al Tusi.
So what year?
800 years ago, 800 something.
Wow.
Before telescope, so naked eye observation.
Wow.
He was an interesting person because when the Mongolian finally managed to get the castle, he changed position and became the royal astronomer for the Mongolian Empire. So, but because of that, he managed to build the world's largest observatory of the time in Maraghe, and also later on, based on that design, Samarkand Observatory.
Wow.
In today Uzbekistan was built. Anyhow, these are the two places that I still have a lot of memories, and really was our major place during the teenagehood as I was growing this hobby of astrophotography. Gradually became a profession with my first assignment for the cover of Iranian astronomy magazine Nujum in 97. That was the first time I ever paid for a photo. And it was Comet Hale-Bopp in March, April 97, the brightest comet of our time, still is.
But going back to that, the moon, can you describe because I think a lot of people have seen the moon in a telescope. What was it about that captured you? What was the difference of what you had seen before versus that?
Well, somebody gave me a book about astronomy translated by my source of inspiration, and today my very good friend Tawfiq Haydarzadeh, who is based in California, astronomy historian, science historian. And he was the editor-in-chief of Astronomy Magazine of Iran at the time. So I got that book as a gift, and there were a couple of maps of the moon. And I was wondering what kind of telescope you need to see so many details of the moon. I thought, you probably need the giant telescope on top of an observatory. So I was so surprised to see even more details than that map just using a small telescope. And, this simple look at the moon can change many people's life. Even today, when you show the moon through a telescope to a kid, it can trigger something very deep within.
Wow. Okay. I'm interested in that. So then going back to the magazine, the astronomy magazine, what was it called? The one in Iran that paid you?
Nujum, which is publishing today. Yeah, it's a private magazine. It's still in publication. And
your editor was a woman, correct?
Tawfiq was a man, but the manager was Tawfiq's wife, Farzaneh Shakib. And these two were the founder of the magazine together with Dr. Reza Mansouri. So these group founded the magazine and continued. Later, I became the editor-in-chief of the magazine for several years.
Okay, I'm thinking of the magazine whose editor was a woman who you later, who became your wife. Can you tell that story?
That's the second story. So after the Comet Hale-Bopp, so that was 97, a year later, we were preparing for a great solar eclipse in Iran in 99. So we were hiring a couple more people, and one of them was a young editor, translator, Shadi Hamedi. We started to date each other later on and work together, and even my style of photography was changed because I was doing short exposure, mainly 20 seconds. 20, 30 seconds, and then I can see in the archive of my slide films that exposures were changing dramatically to longer, like several hours, to give me more time to chat with her.
Yeah, so can you tell me about that? What was the experience of meeting her, and how was her work in general? How was the work of like female editors at that time? Because I know it was probably during Khatami's time.
Yes, yes. I was a teacher, young teacher at Zafarani Observatory. This is an observatory still active in northern Tehran. Belongs to Kanun Parvarish. And that observatory started lots of astronomy education and outreach in Tehran in general. You know, today when I'm doing a talk somewhere, just a few days ago, I was in Stanford for a talk. And when I asked, you know, who has been my student here, you know, there were 4 or 5, and they were all from the same observatory. So there was a really active center. This was in mid 90s when I joined them. And Shadi was one of the students at the time, but I didn't know her that much until we became a colleague in the Nujum office. After she graduated from the school and joined the university, she became our colleague. And we had a very equal position for the editorial. I would say together all the staff were half women. And you could see this in the classes as well. Astronomy was very, very popular among young female science enthusiasts in general. One reason, I would say even more than half of our class were female. And the main reason is, for a young woman, there were not many options to have a different thing in life, to have something unique to experience. Stargazing is very unique for a young person. You know, if you introduce that in an American society, for example, in European society, a young woman has so many options, from athletic activities, sport activities, to parties, to being with friends, to doing this and that. And astronomy become one out of many. But back in that time in Iran, this was such a unique opportunity to experience life differently. And I would say that was the reason we had such an active woman community in all ages in astronomy and science. In universities, you could see the same. And it was the same in our office too.
Interesting. How does that compare to the U.S.? Are there as many females in astronomy in the U.S.?
It was not at that time, if we compare it, but today, yes. For example, when I started the World at Night project, out of 25 photographers at the beginning, there were none women. And that was a major issue for us, because I come from a family and mentality of this equality, and this was a source of problem throughout the years. And we were looking for, and we were in promoting this in the workshops and our activities, until gradually this has changed. And today we have women members in the World at Night, and there are many astrophotographers in this field, many astronomers, women astronomers as well, astronauts as well. So it's changing for sure.
Although I'll say, in the 90s, I feel like in the US, you could count the number of female directors, on one hand, whereas you'd go to Iran and, most of the major movies were coming from female directors. Or in the architecture field where I am, there was, many more men than there were women. And again, in Iran, it seems like there were a majority of women in architecture. So it's just that was always very striking to me.
Yeah, in the range that the decision is made by people and public organization, women are very active in Iran. In the range where the decision is made by the government and the system, the regime, then you will see the drop.
Yes, absolutely. So then you also talked about back then, you would get visas to go to different places, not always very easily, and sometimes you would miss major events. Can you talk about that a bit, how you were able to travel? And actually, before that, how did you learn English so well?
Mainly by traveling. Yeah, I went to a few classes, but it was mainly by communication and traveling. Started outside of Iran, started in 1999. I was in charge outside of my family, little trip to Turkey and India, things like that. But as an adventure explorer, I would say in 1999, I was the co-organizer of a tour on solar eclipses by our magazine. And that last the total solar eclipse of the century brought many people to Iran. So this tour that we had for 20 people, half of them American, brought my friend Mike Simmons, who we became colleagues later on, and he was a source of inspiration to me, and we founded the Word at Night project together and still collaborate today. So he was that source that changed my mind. It's about time to go to other countries and do new documentaries. However, I was a university student, and you cannot get outside of the country without the mandatory military period. So that was an issue. But then they announced it. All of a sudden, the government was out of money. They announced it, we are going to sell this for equivalent of $800. So I collected some money through my work with the Nujum magazine and stopped the university in the last semester of the physics.
Wow.
And because, you're saving 2 years of your time, and Iran is a country that can go on war anytime because of the aggressive behavior we have through the regime. So it has that potential. Why you want to risk your life for nothing? So I stopped the university. I got my passport and started traveling. So the first one was to Germany, and then 2001 was a major breakthrough where I went to Africa with another colleague for a solar eclipse. I went to the US for a number of documentary programs in observatories, and 2003 to Antarctica for another solar eclipse. So it was 10 years or more of documenting solar eclipses in 7 continents. And we built a program, a 13-episode program called Eclipse Chasers, or Juyandegan Kusuf, for Iranian TV with Siyavesh Safarian and his brother Fuad. So the main problem, as you noted, was visa. So, of course, after the budget, you get the sponsor for the trip. Then comes, you have Iranian passport and you have to wait for a few months. I remember in 2007, the brightest comet in a decade appeared, Comet Macnaut, but it was visible only in the southern hemisphere. So we thought maybe the closest place that we can get quickly visa is South Africa. We went to the South African embassy. The guy who interviewed us was one of the viewers of my TV program. I said, we're done. Yeah. And after 10 days, he told me, no, this is not going to work, and you have to wait another month. And the comet was gone. So I missed the brightest comet in that decade, simply due to visa. And that happened again in 2010. I was invited by the Science Ministry of Argentina to do a project for the eclipse in Patagonia by the government of Argentina. So I went to the embassy and they said, yes, of course, this is very important and so on. And after 2 months, they told me, sorry, we are not doing any regular visa for any Iranian, because Argentina and Iran, after that explosion in a restaurant, that relationship basically ended. So there was no visa unless you are a politician, And then once I had some free time, I calculated how much money I paid for visa or how much opportunities I missed over the time due to lack of visa financially. And this was before even I left Iran. This was well over $100,000. Just because of having Iranian passport, this is the amount of opportunities you're losing. And it's a much more even serious issue for many other Iranians who need this to change their path for education, to get opportunities. And having this passport, which was once a very valuable passport until 78 or so, now it's such an icon of problem. As soon as you show it in any airport, there are some eyebrows. Especially when you're going to small countries, when they see an Iranian passport in smaller countries where they don't get the visitors, you always expect to have some nice long chat. But now I'm, for the past 5, 6 years, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm traveling with American passport.
But you talk about this a lot about how, the sky, we all live under the same sky and it unites us all. And it's this really, there's all these organizations without borders. You have astronomers without borders. You have doctors without borders. But I'm sure the absurdity of, looking at stars being, being dependent on this booklet that someone gives you, and then someone has the opportunity to tell you, don't go there, don't go there. I'm sure it is just maddening. I can't understand how it wouldn't drive you crazy.
Yeah, in fact, it was very inspiring at the same time. That was the main reason I started the Board at Night project, to break these boundaries we have for no reason and find a unifying breach between all of us through the eternal roof of the sky. So when I was taking photos together with my colleague Oshin, we were looking at these variety of landscapes and variety of cultural and civilization landmarks we have. Iran has well over 1 million registered archaeological sites. And you can go to a temple, a mosque, church, you can go to an ancient castle, and all these ruins and ancient hills, but the sky is the same. And throughout these years in Iran, I noticed there is a message here that we are looking at the same sky, one people, one sky. And to bring this to an international level, I created the Word at Night project based on an idea that was formed in my teenagehood. And it was developed further because of these limitations I had, from getting a visa to access to a free internet, which was basically impossible, or fast internet that I needed for my work, to have freedom of speech, all these. And I could break through it through this common passion of astronomy with my other colleagues. And that's how the Word at Night project was formed, by somebody on the opposite side of the planet in Los Angeles. Los Angeles and Tehran were the two places that we formed this project. And the idea is the same, how to break our boundaries through a common passion we have to something.
Wow.
For me, it was astronomy. For somebody else, it could be biology, it could be plants, it could be some interest to chemistry, anything.
Absolutely. So then what about the limitations? You had a photograph in one of your talks of the 40 people, I think, that you worked with, and you said only a third of them are still in Iran or something like that. So what were the limitations of being in Iran specifically, even without the visa issues? What were the issues?
Well, major thing is uncertainty. You don't know what happens the next day. I was on a live TV program. So you make just one mistake, you go directly from there to Evin prison. You just cross the line and you're done. Uncertainty. I invited Mike Simmons frequently to Iran, and he was so much contributing to change of astronomy outreach in the country by several visits to the country. And once I was visited, he was in our house, and I had a ring on the door, and there was a secret agent from Iran, information intelligence services, and he said, why are you doing this? How do you know he's not a spy? And that continued. They took me over to an office. It's just a burden for nothing. It seems that they're afraid of everything, and this uncertainty comes to your work, to your life. If you're a woman, you don't know if you survive one easy day on the street. If you're captured and then you're done for nothing, uncertainty is the main reason. If you're a student, you don't know if you're fired the next day for no reason other than having a speech on your own freedom. You're practicing a religion that they don't like, so you lose that opportunity of your life. So if you don't have a certain future for your next day, even for your immediate next day, this is not life.
Wow. Yeah, it's such a shame because you look at these people, or just you are such an international treasure, and it, we're Iranian, we're, all doing our best, doing our work, and it's a shame that you can't be this national treasure in Iran. It's so sad.
While I was there, I did a lot. I should mention that, Iran
Yeah.
was the place I started a lot of things, including the Word at Night project. So these
Yes.
limitations didn't really die out my passion. In fact, it generates something even stronger to fight against it by doing more, by breaking the boundaries. So it helped in a way to a certain level. And then you feel that you are now on a flat area. You don't go anywhere further from here. It's time to break through. And that unfortunately means emigration. And it's the same thing for many other people, intellectuals we have in the country. You either see yourself not doing anything more or you have to leave.
Wow. Yeah. But it is interesting to me that something like the night sky can be like so political, Like it's hard to separate politics from anything in so many ways.
That's very true. Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So can you tell me now we'll shift into the project itself. Can you tell me about the project, the World at Night?
So my current work has 3 scopes. One is the wonders of the universe of night sky, how to connect people with the night sky in general, while we also reveal the problem of light pollution we have. And that work is partly with the National Geographic and partly with the World at Night project, which is my own nonprofit activity. Then the second scope is with the National Geographic Society. It's a grant called Life at Night Atlas, where I concentrate on animals and wildlife in its natural rhythm at nighttime. So it could be nocturnal life, migratory life at night, glowing life, such as bioluminescence, fireflies, things like that, and how light pollution is impacting everything at nighttime. And we were not aware of a few decades ago, but now we are. And the third scope is space related, which is currently a project called Above and Under. And I do coordinated photography with an astronaut who is aboard the space station, Don Pettit. And this NASA astronaut has been a source of inspiration to me since 2001, when he first went to space station and started time-lapse photography of Earth at night and stars from space. And it was mind-blowing to me when I was in Nujum magazine. So I contacted him from Iran, and we kept in touch and collaborated together. And this is the first major project we're doing together. So every day I receive a message on WhatsApp from space that he has a question or he's answering a suggestion I have, and we coordinate topics together. In the next few weeks, I need to travel to multiple places where we can find synchronous photography of the same phenomena or place.
And what is it about night? So I will say my name, Leila, means night. It comes from the Arabic word of night. But I have always had this kind of fear of night. And you talk about this too in your work. What is it about night? Like, what was it that interested you about night? And why is night important?
First of all, it's very adventurous. We are diurnal species. We're not used to be out at dark. Being nocturnal is not really a thing for a human being that much. And our eyesight is not that great compared, for example, to a cat. But the brain is compensating for that. So if you let the eye to get dark adopted, and our brain is revealing more and more by stacking images. So it's remarkable how much you can see, in fact, at dark. And it's remarkable how much you can get acquainted with the night after understanding all the wonders and activities we have at nighttime. There is a saying, night hides a world, but reveals a universe. And it's so true, because once you let it introduce it to you, you will see how fascinating it is. And you go to a national park, for example. For work, I go to Grand Canyon. And all the people leave the canyon viewpoints right at sunset. And I just enter. So you enter to a place where it's now empty, and you get connected with nature in a very unique way because you're alone, and you hear things that you don't hear in daytime because it's so busy, or you receive information in your brain in a way that in daytime it's impossible because you're saturated with everything. But at night, it's dark. When you see the Milky Way, it's the only signal you're receiving. So it's very striking to you. And there is no sound. And when you hear a nocturnal species sound, it's very striking. So all these peaks of sensation, it's so unique at night. And at the same time, you feel connected to earth and sky in the same time. You feel connected to your past and future, your origin and destiny at the same time.
Can you tell more about that? I've heard you say that before. What do you mean by that?
Because when you're looking at stars, these are lights from the past. Because of their distance, you're looking at a star like Betelgeuse, the famous Betelgeuse in the shoulder of Orion. The light is coming from 600 years ago. You're looking at constellation Andromeda. There is a little halo there, which in fact a Persian astronomer cataloged it in his books of stars, book of fixed stars, known as astronomer known as Sufi, 1,000 years ago. And now today we know we're looking at the galaxy, at our neighboring galaxy, and light from the Andromeda galaxy is coming from more than 2 million years ago. And you're looking at it with your own unaided eye. It's like a time machine. So you're looking in the past of the universe. And at the same time, you're looking at the things that are showing how the future of the sun will be. There are some stars that are in the later stages. You're looking, say you're at archaeological sites in Persepolis, and you're looking at these ruins from 2,500 years ago, and there are some stars shining the light from the same time in the universe because of their distance. So there are all these connections, and the night sky in general is our origin, because life on Earth was most probably came with molecules that comets brought to Earth. And not only water came with comet impacts in early solar system 4 billion years ago, but the complex molecules, carbon-based molecules that formed life, we found it today in comets. So this was probably the source of life on Earth. And it's our destiny, because eventually the human civilization needs to explore other planets for other sources of living.
I think that that's a lot of what you're saying now is a lot of my fear of the night, is that I think that when you're not used to it, well, first you have to really slow down at night. Like you're saying, it's slow. It takes time, right? It doesn't come to you very easily like the day does. The day you can see things, there's sounds, it's very stimulating. And at night that stimulation is gone. And I think this past and this future just makes me think of like eternal and like death, and those types of thoughts come to me a lot. Do you have that as well? Does that happen to you? Do you have any fear that comes?
Yeah, some also people ask me frequently, do I get afraid at dark? Of course I do. Like any
Okay,
other
yeah.
human, you get afraid at dark, but you sometimes do a few things, you get afraid, but there is joy behind it.
Okay.
And that's the thing, the joy of seeing the Milky Way. It's so unique. It's a life-changing experience. Majority of humanity now live under light pollution. In North America, for example, more than 90% of population cannot see the Milky Way anymore from their living areas.
Right.
So it became like a science fiction surreal scene to enjoy simply the Milky Way, which was once visible to everybody from anywhere. Now you have to go to these dark sky sanctuaries, dark sky designated sites, some of the national parks in the US and Canada, for example, to see the Milky Way. And this experience fills you with such a unique energy
Mm.
that you come back and you are relaxed for a week, So
Mm.
being afraid for a few minutes or thinking about death for a few seconds, I would say it's worth it. Yeah.
Right. Well, so is this something that you can do in the city, or you're saying that this is something you should go to a park to do every once in a while?
It's impossible to see the Milky Way from the city because of
Okay,
light
right.
pollution, unless there is a power cut, there is a blackout, for
Yes.
example. And it happened too. I remember in some 20 years ago or more, um, 25 years ago in Tehran, there was a blackout. 8 different provinces were out of power for one night. And the next day in the magazine, we received calls after
Yeah.
calls that what was this cloud in the sky? What kind of experiment the government was doing that
Yeah.
created this cloud? And we were explaining this was the Milky Way. You were looking at the Milky Way for the first time in many decades in Tehran. And it happened in Los Angeles as well. In early 2000, we had a blackout in the US, in LA, and same thing. People were calling 911 that we were looking at this mysterious cloud.
Yeah. So then the specific thing that you're saying is you can't experience that in the city as is right now. But this is your project right now. So in the Smithsonian, the exhibit was very educational. You had photographs of the night sky and then different things that you could specifically do. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what each of us could do to kind of fight this at this point?
Yes, the exhibit in the second floor of the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C., it's called Lights Out. And it's trying to emphasize on the message that light pollution is not the light we need for our life. It's the light we waste. Majority of street lights, security lights, commercial lights are going to the horizon and sky. Easily waste of more than 70%. With the newer street lights, the LEDs are usually cut out. That means you don't see the bulb on the horizon. And if it's full cut out, which is shielded, it's perfect. So we reduce the amount of light pollution only to reflection from the ground. But that's not the case in most places around the planet. You go to, for example, a church, a castle, a mosque, or a monument, and it's illuminated from the ground with a massive floodlight from different angles, and only less than 10% of that light reaches the statue. Where does the less go? It's going to space, creating a sky glow, changing the migration path of birds. We have well over 1 million birds dying in North America due to light pollution every year. That's a huge number for nothing. I mean, light pollution is not like plastic in the ocean that takes decades to take care of. It's a switch. And that is not only a physical switch, it's a cultural switch, and goes back to your previous question. We are afraid of dark, and that's why we light it as much as possible. We change the natural darkness to almost daytime. Once I was working on a project for National Geographic about light pollution. I went to Death Valley National Park, which is a darkest sky area, to document the light of Las Vegas and Los Angeles from a far distance. And I came back. We were in the condo association Boston area. And all the lights next to our condo were changed to very bright white LEDs. So I contacted the condo manager and said, the neighbors decided that we need brighter light. And 2 of these lights were next to our bedroom. I came back from a light pollution story to that scene. It was shocking. It took me 3 weeks to talk to the neighbors, to educate them why we don't need this. Sitting on my porch, it felt like sitting in a gas station, because there was this 5,000 Kelvin white LED shining on me. It was like daytime. Why do we need so much light? So there are so many good solutions today. Even if you're not in a safe area, you can use shielded light, not creating glares, warmer light, dimmer, and motion sensor. Use it
Mm.
only when you need it.
Is that how you convince them?
Yes, we didn't manage with the motion sensor, but we changed it to dimmer, warmer LED at 3000 Kelvin. So anything below 3000 Kelvin is considered warm LED. But they didn't accept the motion sensor, and we moved to the next place. So
Okay.
that was one of the reasons we sold that house. Yeah.
You talk about like in Belgium, they have this identity. I don't know if you know about Austin, but well, first we have the biggest urban bat population, which are, affected by the lights that you say. But also, do you know about our moon towers? Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, so we had a serial killer in the 1800s, and since then they installed these moon towers. There's about 17 in the town, and it's part of the identity of Austin. So many businesses are called Moon Tower, but they're these tall, white light, bright lights. So I even think about that in my city. For example, if I went to city council and said, okay, let's talk about light pollution, I think people would revolt. They wouldn't. It's part of the identity of the city.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd like to document that, in fact.
Yes. Yes. So they're super bright and they're the color of the moon, they're white. That's the whole point of it. And it's so that all the streets are illuminated so that the serial killer in the 1800s doesn't come back to haunt us, I guess. I don't know.
And that's an interesting story, in fact, because there was a couple of research, one in Chicago, where the most illuminated downtown Chicago areas, are they seeing less crime due to illumination? And it was negative. So that means illuminating more doesn't decrease crime, because when you're illuminating more, it's harsher. There are darker shadows. Our eyes get saturated with the bright areas and the shadows become pitch black. So you provide enough spaces to hide easily. And it's the same with home security lights. If you make a very bright single light, you will have very dark shadows, especially white, because our eyes is more sensitive at nighttime to shorter wavelengths, such as blue-white, compared to yellow. So white becomes really bright, and then shadow becomes pitch black. And the same issue with car headlights too. It's better to use warm headlights compared to white. But going back to the point you mentioned, we have similar condition in Belgium, in Paris, in Las Vegas. You cannot really change the cities to a dark sky destination. It would be almost impossible. We have a couple of success. One is Flagstaff, one is Tucson, where due to the dark sky laws, thanks to an observatory nearby, the whole city has changed to sky-friendly lights. And you can see the Milky Way from the edge of Flagstaff. It's remarkable, from a city that size, or Tucson the same. But that doesn't happen everywhere. So it's a lost battle. However, we have dark sky communities. Let me introduce this organization known as Dark Sky International. It's based in Tucson. The website is darksky.org, and they have designation for places. One is Dark Sky Park. The other one is called Dark Sky Community. So let's say there's a group of people who wants to change their neighborhood to sky-friendly lights. I would say human-friendly lights, because you keep the natural circadian rhythm in that area, reduce the impact of major diseases caused by this white LEDs. And they receive this designation, International Dark Sky Community. And that could be something for your area and many other places as well. First step is to introduce this with resources you have, not going directly face to face, as you mentioned, because this is used for identity. So it's not going to easily work. We use light not only for safety and security, for art, for even control in some areas. You look at the border of US and Mexico, it was not illuminated until just recently. We are adding so much white LEDs to the border, which is creating an issue for animals migration, because the white light is expanding the border They stop when they see the bright light. And that stop in flying birds, stop in flying insects, things like monarch butterflies. So there's so many impacts that we're just realizing today. And the same with these towers. You have the moon towers, because they're attracting migratory birds down to the city, and Austin is within the migration path. So the first thing is to introduce the problem, not from the angle that we are losing the night sky. Well, honestly, very few people care about the night sky, but we do care about animals. We do care about human health. So from this angle, we do care about saving energy and money. From this angle, it might work. And one great example that how we kept the identity, but it so reduced the impact, is the 9/11 light in tribute in New York City. The light is still going to the sky, but there is a radar system by biologists during the migration season, which is exactly 9/11. They count the number of migratory birds which are trapped in the light. And as soon as it hits around 1,000, they turn off the light for some minutes. The birds continue their path, they turn on again. So we can keep our identity, but reduce the impact. Let's say these towers can be there, but only on occasion, or once in a month, we turn it on.
Got it. Okay, that's super helpful. I think I will link to that website on the notes for this podcast, and I'll definitely look at that and see. I think that my neighbors would all be interested in something like that. But what about how old is your son now?
8 years.
Okay, so how about him? Or have you introduced him to the night sky? I know we have, bedtime with this society especially. But what is his relationship to the night?
Yes, he was enforced to get introduced. He had no other choice. Because since he was 2 years old, I was on trips, and sometimes my family was with me. We went all around New Zealand on a speaking lecture and night photography. So he got introduced to this since very early age, and he was singing solar system songs, age 3. And so that was within him. But nowadays he's more into wildlife and biology.
Okay. But he does experience the night sky.
Yes.
And that slowness. Okay, wonderful. Well, to kind of finish, I know we're out of time, but I wanted to ask you about your relationship with Iran now, your relationship with the diaspora, and kind of your hope for the future. I know you're not going back anytime soon, but is that something that you hope for in the future?
Yeah, I was in Iran every other year for workshop, family visits, doing educational activities until 2022. So just a few months before Mahsa Amini incident and the death. Woman Life Freedom next milestone started, and I became a part of it because it was impossible to stay silent. Although my field is so irrelevant to maybe social activities like this, but it's a responsibility for everybody. It was, and it is still today. So that was the reason my trips going back home stopped. But I still contribute. I still collaborate with friends back in Iran. I still answer questions coming from Iran, and try to provide opportunities for colleagues who want to work in this field. And then with Iranian Americans and diaspora in general outside of the country, we are doing things. I have an interesting project, in fact, with another Canadian Iranian, Babak, who is a composer based in Prague.
Yeah.
And he's a composer and conductor for Prague Metropolitan Orchestra. And in 2019, we started a project together to create these series known as Celestial Orchestra for a live performance. Unfortunately, a few months later, it was pandemic. Perfect timing for a live event. So it was postponed, and then we continue to produce. We now have more than 1 hour of musical pieces synced with my night sky imagery and videos, and it's still growing potentially for live performance or some other outcomes. It's been really joyful and pleasant collaboration with Barbat, and I have similar ideas with other musicians in different fields. So I'm going to events that Iranian Americans are organizing. I had a collaboration with Paya recently in their annual event in Texas. It was in Houston, I guess. And then just recently in Stanford, it was invitation by Dr. Milani and their Iranian Studies department at Stanford. So I would say it's growing, and I'm getting to know more of the Iranian diaspora in the US who are actively working to preserve the culture, the Persian culture.
Yeah. What is your hope for the future for Iran at this point?
Well, Iran has a still young average population, although we're thinking about the future that it's aging, but still today it's in the range of 32 on average, and more than 60% of the country are Gen Z and millennials. And this new generation are not really bounded with our cultural limitations in the past, specifically religion. And because of that, they're open to any future they want to select. The backbone of a religious system is lost. And that gives you a future that will be decided by its new generation.
Wonderful. Well, Babak Tafreshi, thank you so much for talking with me. So there's the book, The World at Night. Where's the best place to find you and your work?
Yes, the book is available on my website if somebody wants to have a signed version for the US. And it's available also on online bookstore worldwide. We have 5 different editions: English, French, German, Japanese, and Chinese at the moment. And then my work is on my own website, babaktafreshi.com, as well as social media, primarily Instagram and YouTube, where I release this new project, Above and Under. As well as there is a TV app called Windows Site, where we stream art on smart TVs, and many of my National Geographic photographers are contributing to. I have more than 600 images there, where you can see some of my images on your own TV.
Wonderful. And is the exhibit still up in DC as well?
The Lights Out exhibit is going to continue until March 26, and then traveling to other places.
Wonderful. I highly recommend it. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, and we'll link to all of this on this show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.